Well, good morning. Thank you for joining us this morning. I apologize about yesterday with the podcast. We just had some trouble with YouTube, so we wanted to, do it right and not start late. So thanks for flexing with me, with us on that way, in that way. So this is, an interesting chapter. Oh, good morning, Sandy. It's good to see you. And anyone else who might be watching, please make sure you say hello as well. It would be great. So this is an interesting chapter because we get, now we're getting into where the main character continues to meet and more different kinds of people. And that's what Lewis is really after here. He wants to present a variety of typologies, a variety of demographics, different kinds of people who seem to obsess in a particular kind of thing regarding their sin, and so it's that thing. Good morning, Carol. It's good to see you too. It's that thing that keeps them in hell. They cannot break from uh, a particular kind of sin that, in essence, has become who they are. And we'll get into this later on in the book, where when a person finally ends up in hell, and I think this is a fair premise, they become the essence of their sin. There isn't anything of their humanity left to a certain degree. It's there isn't anything left to redeem. It's been all eaten up and consumed and taken over by unresolved sin in their lives. And so, in this particular chapter, um, the main character encounters a skeptic, and that skeptic uh, is, I mean, it's really toxic. I mean, when you read the chapter and you see the kind of person he is, and so, the opposite of skepticism is trust, and so here this guy can't trust anything, and as you know, um, without trust, without faith, um, you can't have a relationship with God, and nor can you really have any kind of a productive life. Nor can you be an appealing person, a person that you'd want to be around. You're so in children's literature, it kind of reminds me a little bit of Eeyore and Winnie the Pooh, where Eeyore is more pessimistic. Skepticism and pessimism are different. Pessimism is when you don't really believe anything's going to turn out well. Skepticism incorporates things like you think that there's some kind of ulterior motive, that there are forces behind a particular thing that are working to their advantage, but not to yours. And so, not only do you not believe what they are telling you, you also believe that they have ulterior motives that favor them, but not you. And so, skepticism always has those added components as opposed to pessimism. But in children's literature, Eeyore is kind of a pessimist, maybe a little bit of a skeptic. And so, in modern day literature, your good journalist has to be somewhat of a skeptic. I mean, he doesn't take things at face value. He or she believes that there may be some other realities behind what's been told to them, and so they're a little skeptical. They're not sure they're being told the entire truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. And so, the modern day journalist is supposed to get behind all of that and find out what is really real and what is truly true. But that's not what happens in modern day journalism today. And this is kind of a rabbit trail, but what is coming out of the Columbia School of Journalism and places like that is that in modern day journalism, what is supposed to. So it's been a complete divergence from you finding out what is really real and truly true, and not taking at face value what has been told to you or what it is that you see immediately. Now, in journalism, there's this higher moral imperative, and all journalism has to be leveraged to achieve that higher moral imperative, as it is embraced by modern day progressivism. Um, so that's what, so journalism is supposed to be somewhat skeptical in a healthy way, but it is not that anymore. So I just needed to add that caveat to that particular example. So so the other thing that it's important to note about a skeptic is that they are the sole authority. Skeptics are the sole authority. It's what they perceive. It's what they conclude. It's what they believe. It's what they know. Everything else around them is suspect. Um, and so, skeptics are um, somewhat empirical. So they want to believe, they believe what they believe based on their senses, what they've experienced, what they've seen, what they've heard, what they've read, those kinds of things. That's what skeptics do. They tend to be somewhat empirical, but the good empiricist will also measure not only what they sense over and against what others sense, and then come up with some kind of collective conclusion based on that. But that's not the way this skeptic in this chapter is. He is the sole authority. There is no one else that can think like he can, that can believe like he can, that can ascertain like he can. And so there's a kind of, with all skeptics like this, there's a kind of autonomy, there's a kind of self deification that they can't trust anyone, including God. The only ones that they can trust are themselves. And so everything, everyone, all other things must comport themselves to the skeptic's perception, to how they. So there's a kind of self deification, a kind of self idolization with skepticism, and that's why it's so toxic and it's so dangerous. So, and that's why I think Lewis um, is including this kind of a person here. Another synonym for skepticism would be cynicism. To be a cynic is almost the same as being a skeptic, and so it's a toxic thing. It's a self deification thing. It's a thing where they demand that everyone else around them comport to their understanding, their perception, their conclusion of the universe around them. Okay, so I thought that would be important to mention that. So again, if you just joined us, please say hello. It'd be great to have you, so we know who you are. If not, that's okay. But it'd be great to know who all is here. Make sure afterwards too that you share this, tell people about it, if you think it's worth other people listening to. So here we go in chapter 7. Although I watched the misfortunes of the ghost and the bowler with some complacency, you'll remember that the guy in the bowler hat was a guy who wanted to take some golden apples with him back into hell. And the waterfall, which spoke to him, was an angelic figure, said, fool, put it down. There is no room for it in hell. And so there's this prevailing theme throughout the book about the differences between the size of heaven and the size of hell, and that they in reality are not two kind of, it's not like a kind of yin yang, two equal forces, but it's radically, radically different than that. So, although I watched the misfortunes of the ghost and the bowler with some complacency, I found when we were left alone that I could not bear the presence of the water giant. It did not appear to take any notice of me, but I became self conscious, and I rather think there was some assumed nonchalance in my movement as I walked away over the flat rocks downstream again. So he's basically saying, I faked nonchalance. I faked like I didn't really care that waterfall was there, when in reality that was the very reason why he left, because he was uncomfortable around that presence. I was beginning to be tired. Looking at the silver fish which darted over the riverbed, I wished greatly to me also that water were permeable. I should have liked to have taken it. I should have liked a dip. And so he's saying here, remember, he's so insubstantial that he can't even penetrate water. So he would have liked to have been where the fish was, but he was still in his very insubstantial state. He had not solidified in any way. And so water and the coolness of it and the refreshment of it remained elusive to him. Thinking of going back, said a voice close at hand. I turned and saw a tall ghost standing with its back against a tree, chewing a ghostly cheroot. It was that of a lean, hard bitten man with gray hair and a gruff but not uneducated voice, the kind of man I have always instinctively felt to be reliable. And so there's something about the voice of this guy that was soothing, reliable in some ways. You wanted to trust it because it was educated and the way he articulated his words. I don't know, said I. Are you? Yes, it replied. I guess I've seen about all there is to see. You don't think of staying? It's all propaganda, it said. Of course, there never was any question of our staying. You can't eat the fruit. You can't drink the water. It takes you all your time to walk on the grass. A human being couldn't live here. All that idea of staying is only an advertisement stunt. And so you see the skepticism here, the cynicism. He can't see the beauty of the place. He can't believe what all the solid beings are saying to all of the other ghosts about the possibility of staying and what it is that they would have to do in order to stay. Um, he is so blinded by his own perceptions and his own conclusions that he really can't see the possibilities of heaven at all. He can only see the negatives. And so it is in our world today, right? There are many people who reject God because they can't see the larger possibilities. All they see is this fallen world. All they see is the sin. All they see is the inequity, the injustice, the disease, and those kinds of things. And they can't see how this world points to a larger, bigger, more magnificent reality. They are blinded to it. This world will not comport to what they think is right, what they think is just. And so anything that anyone has to say about a good and loving and just God is dismissed out of hand, because that God, the God that we believe in, won't comport himself to what his sense of justice and goodness and rightness is. And so they believe then that the Christian faith is all about propaganda, that it's myth, it's not true, it's an emotional crutch. It's those kinds of things. That's all propaganda, it said. Of course, there never was any question of our staying. You can't eat the fruit, you can't drink the water. It takes all your time to walk on the grass. So it is true they can't currently do that, but that doesn't mean that. But just because they can't do that now does not eliminate the possibility that they couldn't do it in the future. What must happen in order for them to have the possibility of walking on the grass, drinking the water, eating the fruit in the future. Why won't he consider that? Then why did you come? Oh, I don't know. Just to have a look around. I'm the sort of chap who likes to see things for himself. Wherever wherever I have been, I have always had a look at anything that was being cracked up or, promoted. Excuse me. When I was out east, I went to see Peking. When What was Peking like? Nothing to it. Just one darn wall inside another. Just a trap for tourists. I've been pretty well everywhere. Niagara Falls, the pyramids, Salt Lake City, the Taj Mahal. So he's seen really some beautiful things, some great things. What was it like? Not worth looking at. They're all advertisement stunts, all run by the same people. That's a combine, a world combine that just takes an atlas, decides where they all have a site or a place to see. Doesn't matter what they choose, anything will do as long as the publicity's properly managed. So, all of these fantastic archaeological things, all these beautiful places that you can go to, and nothing to see. He was unmoved, didn't matter, because what blinded him was that he felt as if he was being manipulated by these conspiratorial people in order to make money of some sort. It was a tourist trap, every one of them. And so it's not like there aren't tourist traps. There are, but you don't have to buy into. You don't have to go to those places and participate in a tourist trap. You can go on your own and you can see the beauty and the magnificence and enjoy all of that on your own, independent. He can't do that. He is too fixated on how other people are manipulating him and people like him, so that they use those beautiful places and those wonderful places in order to make money or whatever. And so he can't see the beauty because he's blinded by this cynicism and sarcasm that he has. And you've lived down there in Greytown for some time in what they call hell. Yes, it's a flop too. They lead you to expect red fire and devils and all sorts of interesting people sizzling on grids, Henry VIII, and all of that. But when you get down there, it's just like any other town. I prefer it up here, said I. Well, I don't see what all the talk is about, said the hard bitten ghost. So this is important too, I think, that a lot of people who are sarcastic or cynical, and maybe cynical is the more centralized word here, because sarcasm has to do with the way in which you express your cynicism in many respects, although it can be a bigger thing than that. But here, this guy is hard bitten, and so you're led to believe that he's had some experiences that have led him to being cynical or hard bitten, as he's described. That our experiences, oftentimes, when they don't turn out as we want them to, our experiences can turn us into skeptics. They can turn us into cynics, can't they? That because we had a negative experience, because it was painful or disappointing, or we lost hope, or any of those kinds of things. Because again, when you are a cynic or when you are a skeptic, then it's difficult to love. It's difficult to believe. It's impossible to trust, to have faith. So somewhere along the line, something happened that caused you to lose your faith and your hope, that caused you to be cynical about the motivation and the existence of anything. And again, that's just a really toxic and cancerous place to be. And so, um, and so, you know, and so the main character in this chapter says, "Now you've been to Greytown, right? Yep. And you've been here, yep. I prefer here," says the main character. Ah, it's all the same. So we've taken over the course of this book so far, we've taken great pains to describe the magnificence and utter beauty of this particular land, as Lewis has in the book itself. It's pastoral, it's glorious to be there, as are the solid beings that they encounter. And yet to this skeptic, they're all the same. There really is no difference to him between this heaven and the hell that he was in. So how blinded do you have to be? How damaged uh, have you become in order for that to happen? It's it's stunning, don't you think? And yet I think that most of us have met some people who are like that. I had some family members who are like that. I have two that come to mind in particular that are that were hard bitten, that were that their life was consumed by a perceived history of disappointments and betrayals, and so they just couldn't step out of that for the longest time. There seems to be some idea that if one stays here, one will get, well, solider or more acclimatized. I know all about that, said the ghost. Same old lie. People have been telling me that sort of thing all my life. If I just hang in there, if I figure it out, things will get better. I'll be able to live in this world that I find myself. So you see the parallels here, right? They told me in the nursery that if I were good, I'd be happy. And they told me at school that Latin would get easier as I went on. After I had been married a month, some fool was telling me that there was always difficulties at first, but with tact and patience, I'd soon settle down and like it. And all through two wars, which didn't they say, I'm sorry, um, and all through two wars, what they didn't say about the good time coming, if only I'd be brave, a brave boy, and go on being shot at. Of course, they'll play that old game here if anyone's fool enough to listen. So he recounts some of his experiences that fed his cynicism and his skepticism, and so he's projecting those experiences with his current experience here in heaven. He just believes that what is taking place in where he is now in heaven is run by the same old people that ran earth and that put him through or or betrayed him or deceived him in those kinds of ways. And so that's what he thinks. What he thinks about heaven. So his empiricism here is failing him. His senses, his perceptions, his views, the way he saw things, heard things on earth led him to think and to believe and to hope or lack hope in life. Here, his empiricism should be overwhelmed by the glories of heaven itself. But his skepticism is so well developed, so poignant, that his empiricism is now failing him. His human ability to ascertain what is really real and truly true no longer exists. His sin has taken him over. But who are they? This might be run by someone different. Entirely new management, do you think? Do you believe it? It's never new management, i.e., God and Satan are the same. You'll always find the same old ring. I know all about it. I know all about dear, kind mummy coming up to your bedroom and getting all she wants to know out of you. But you always found she and father were in the same firm, really. Didn't we find that both sides in all the wars were run by the same armament firms, or the same firm which is behind the Jews and the Vatican and the dictators and the democracies and all the rest of it? All this stuff up here is run by the same people as the town. They're just laughing at us. So you really get to see the bitterness that he has, and how that bitterness has led to a certain belief of these conspiratorial kinds of things, that it's all the same people, maybe not the same people running everything, but the same types of people running everything. He cannot he cannot see the glory of God. He can't see the glories of heaven. He can't see what he could be transformed into. His bitterness, his anguish, his cynicism, his skepticism has utterly and completely blinded him to it. So the main character says, and it's interesting in this chapter, there are these simple lines that articulate a larger truth. So weren't you in Greytown? I thought they were at war, he says here. I thought they were at war. A very simple thing that does present the reality. It cuts through all of the complexity. Look, I thought heaven and hell were at war, is what he's saying. Of course you did. That's the official version, but who's ever seen any signs of it? Oh, I know that's how they talk, but if there's a real war, why don't they do anything? Don't you see that if the official version were true, these chaps up here would attack and sweep the town out of existence? They've got the strength. If they wanted to rescue us, they could do it. But obviously, the last thing they want to end is their so-called war. The whole game depends on keeping it going. And so, as with any kind of cynicism or skepticism, there is an element of truth. So, why does God not rescue us immediately? Why does he allow things to continue to unfold? Well, we believe that God has a plan, that there's a providence to all this, that he is sovereign, that certain things have to be accomplished first before all of this ends. And we trust him to do that. And so that's where our trust comes in. That's where our faith comes in. And that's where his skepticism and his cynicism leaves him behind. This account of the matter struck me uncomfortably plausible, and I said nothing, said the main character. Anyway, said the ghost, who wants to be rescued? What the hell could there be to do here? Or there, said I. So again, these very simple truth statements. Quite, said the ghost. They've got you either way. Well, so he even turns that around, right, into some kind of cynical statement. What would you like to do if you had your choice? So there's a key question. Really, it's the key question throughout the book. If you have a choice of staying here or going there, or staying there or going here, what would you choose? There you go, said the ghost with a certain triumph. Ask me to make a plan. It's up to the management to find something that doesn't bore us, isn't it? It's their job. Why should we do it for them? That's just where all the parsons and the moralists have got the thing upside down. They keep on asking us to alter ourselves. So he doesn't want to change. He wants to hang on to what he is. There isn't anything more desirable about what God calls him to, how he could be different. It's all the same to him. But if the people who run the show are so clever and so powerful, why don't they find something to suit their public? All this poppycock about growing harder so the grass doesn't hurt our feet now. Now, there's an example. What would you say if you went to a hotel where the eggs were all bad, and when you complained to the boss, instead of apologizing and changing his dairyman, he just told you that if you tried, you'd get to like the bad eggs in time. So that's his view of it, that he bears no moral responsibility. There's no complicity on his part. It's all what God chooses not to do in order to suit him, rather than him seeing the beauty of what God calls us to do and what God is willing to do, and then changing himself in order to be in order to participate in those things that God is willing to give and provide. Well, I'll be getting along, said the ghost after a short silence. You coming my way? There doesn't seem to be much point in going anywhere on your showing, I replied. A great depression had come over me, and at least it's not raining here. Excuse me. Not at the moment, said the hard-bitten ghost. But I never saw one of those bright mornings that didn't turn to rain later on. So even on Earth, those beautiful mornings that we all wake up to, it's in, at least in his world, in his universe, those bright mornings always turn to rain in some fashion. And then he says this, and by gum, when it doesn't rain here, ah, you hadn't thought of that. It hadn't occurred to you that with the sort of water they have here, every raindrop will make a hole in you like a machine gun bullet. That's their little joke, you see. First of all, tantalize you with ground that you can't walk on and water that you can't drink, and then drill you full of holes. But they won't catch me that way. And a few minutes later, he moved off. So this guy had completely lost it. He was he the sin of a lack of faith, the sin of an unwillingness to believe, the sin of having no hope, the sin of not actually loving anyone else or anything else other than himself, metastasizes itself into into a cynicism and a skepticism that is cancerous and toxic and probably has put him beyond reach. He has become the essence of his sin. And so I think the application here for us is, what are the sins that are in our lives? And in what manner have those sins sought or been successful in taking over larger portions of our lives, so that it begins to infect us more and more? Is it pride? Is it arrogance? Is it hate? Is it lust? Is it skepticism or cynicism? What things, and this is the other application, what things in our past have we experienced that that made those kinds of sins easier or possible, or gave birth to certain sins in our lives? And because of those experiences that we've had in the past, we almost justify the sins that we have now and the sins that want to emanate and manifest and grow on themselves throughout the whole of our lives. Because, remember, sin breeds sin. Sin is perpetually pregnant. So it no longer gives birth to a sin, another sin. Then the sin that it gave birth to is also pregnant with another sin or other sins. And so it doesn't really have to work very hard or take very long for sin to spread more and more throughout the course of our life. And the danger is that if it goes unresolved, and we choose not to deal with it, that sin then begins to take over the whole of our life, and we become the very essence of sin itself, and therefore maybe beyond redemption. Maybe that is the essence of the rejection of the Holy Spirit or the blaspheming of the Holy Spirit in that regard. Maybe that's part of what it means. So, in any case, this is a little bit of a shorter chapter, but it's profound. And I think we probably, all of us, if we've lived long enough, we know a person like this, but see the larger lesson that experiences in life shape us, and how they shape us and how we allow them to shape us makes a difference. Do we allow those, when we have those experiences that are beyond our control, that may have been painful and difficult, do they make us victims or do they make us survivors? He was a victim, but the main character is contemplating what it means to be a survivor. Those experiences that we have earlier in life, have they shaped us in ways? Have they given us permission to include certain kinds of sins? Have we rationalized certain kinds of sins in our lives because of those experiences? And we've not come to terms with that. And by not coming to terms with it, we in fact allow or give the possibility or the opportunity for the sin that is always pregnant with sin to continue to perpetuate itself throughout the course of our life. I think those are the applications of this particular chapter, and I think helpful and important. So that's what I have for you this morning. A little shorter. I hope that's okay. But please, please, please spread this, share this with people that you know. I think this is a great lesson for all of us. So you have a great day, and thanks for joining us. Take care, and see you next Wednesday. Bye bye.